I think we'll hang out just another minute or two, see if we have any other people come straggling in. All right, I think we'll get started. First of all, thanks for coming out, everybody. I know it's the coveted after lunch slot here. Nice little, I see a couple of sugary beverages. There's a Diet Coke, good to see that. I'm Brett Johnson, I'm Academic Technology Project Manager here at Harvard Law School. I'm presenting today on H2O, the online casebook, textbook suite developed here in-house. So we're presenting with Tom Boone, who's our faculty support librarian. Faculty services librarian. I was going to ask you which to go for. So a quick overview of what this session will be like. I'm going to do a pretty quick, I'm sure some of you know about H2O, the platform, what it does, how it works. I'm going to start out with just a quick little overview of H2O, kind of summarize it, that won't be too long. Then we're going to have Tom take over. He's going to go over some of the considerations as far as content ingestion, copyright, those sort of issues. And then we'll wrap it up with, that'll come back to me, and we're going to go over sort of where we are now with H2O, which is sort of a summer development phase. So things we've encountered, things we've learned through that process, new things we're adding, and also what's still to come. So let's kick it off again. Thanks for coming out. So H2O. So this right here is a torts law casebook. I'm sure you're familiar with it. Third edition. This is published 2002. It was about $140. It's got about 200 something cases in it, and it weighs about 8 pounds. And it's got introductions by the authors. What can you do with it? You can read it. You can highlight it. You can write in the margins. Annotate in it. All that. And of course, instructors, professors can use it to intimidate students during office hours as well. So this is an iPad with Professor Zittrain's torts law casebook pulled up. Now this casebook was updated about 10 months ago. It's fully customized by the professor with about 150 something cases, All of those are fully edited, annotated, and highlighted by the professor, along with supplemental texts, notes, and links out to pertinent information. This weighs about 1 pound and is free. The casebook, not the iPad. So this is created using H2O, which is an online classroom tool for creating your own textbooks or course material collections. It's customizable, it's free, it's shareable, it's remixable, and obviously you can look at it while you're waiting at the bus stop or anywhere really. It allows professors and students to create and share content openly under the Creative Commons 3.0 license, so it's just attributable, non-commercial, and share alike. H2O was developed by the Berkman Center for Internet and Society along with the Harvard Law School Library and has been utilized by professors across Harvard Law School as well as other institutions. Now I like to see H2O, consider H2O as almost like the casebook on, after a year of workout DVDs, P90X or something. It's strong, it's lean. This is how I summarize H2O. It's personal, it's practical, it's collaborative, and it is flexible. So it's personal. H2O not only lets the professor select the cases to use in their course, through H2O they can highlight, add annotations, and I think the coolest part, edit the case itself. So they're not constrained by how the casebook's author has chosen to edit the case. H2O will have the full case, and then the instructor can hide or show whatever slices of that case they like for their course. So you're able to customize the case, but you can also add other information to H2O, other types of content. So links to PDFs, images, video, audio, all of that. So meaning the lion's share of the course content, not just cases, can be put into a sequence in H2O. We call that sequence a playlist, as you can see here. And use that, you can utilize that to organize the course. It's almost like a living syllabus in that way. It's practical. H2O, instructors, they don't have to use the heavy, expensive, and often superfluous casebooks. You're not making the students pay for those and just lug them around, hurting their back. Lighter backpacks equals less lower back pain. It's chiropractical, is what it is for students. All right, it helps them. We don't want to see them leaving the bookstore like this. I don't want to see that anymore. It's collaborative. So sharing is part of H2O's DNA. So built into it, not just creating content, but sharing and remixing other users' content. How does this work? So let's say a professor builds out a playlist. A user can grab an entire playlist, remix it, which is the H2O parlance for basically a copy of your own to play with and customize. And basically just change that as works for your course or the instructor's course. So you could take Charles Freed's civil rights litigation course, his playlist, remix that, pull some cases out, make some edits to what he did, and then you're off to the races. Now maybe I see your remix, I like your version of Freed's playlist. I remix yours, I make my own changes, and H2O also keeps a history of where these playlists came from. So say we go all the way around the loop, Charles Freed sees my playlist and he's like, oh no, that's I like that, he used that like that. Now maybe he incorporates some of my changes. So that's built into it, to have that sort of sharing, collaborating aspect. Virtuous circle. Lastly, it is flexible, as I said. It's digital courseware, meaning obviously it can be updated the day of class or the hour before. Hopefully the students have been notified that that's going to happen. But it's not only the fact that you can edit it, it's digital, but like I said, the content tools themselves are where the flexibility really kicks in. So the instructor hiding or editing portions of the case, students can still, so right here, see that paragraph 7 where that ellipsis is? That's a chunk that the instructor has hidden. The student can still click on that ellipsis and snap open that section. So it can be they're only seeing what the instructor wants them to see, but if they want to know more information, more context, they can click that, it snaps open, they can read what was hidden, click it, close it back up. So that's if they want access to that, if they're interested. Now what's been the response? The response has varied, some from course to course, but in general, we've had a really, really positive response from students. Last round of surveys, 79% of the students preferred H2O over the traditional casebook. Why? We've already gone through these. It's cheaper. You know, they can buy two, instead of buying two $200 casebooks, they just imagine they just buy one iPad Air. I told you it wasn't free. It's lighter. They can read it anywhere they have a device, and of course, it's curated by the instructor to only their version of the most important cases they want them to see. So that's students. The professors, what they found is that ability to really control the content in a more precise way than they were able to before, showing only the portions they want, as well as able to put them in a sequence, like we said, a playlist, so it can be placed within context. This is Chris Bavitz's Music and Digital Media Rights course. So this is one of his sub-playlists, and he's got a case, see 3.1, he's got a case there. He's got a link to basically a little response to that case. He's got a link to another outside source, which is a PDF, and then a few more pieces of case law below that. So that's it's like a sub-playlist there. So this, that we wonder, and we were very interested to see what this means for the future of the casebook, now that it can sort of evolve in this way, or really micro-evolve in this way. Because we're interested to see what will develop, what will emerge as faculty share their custom casebooks with each other. We're wondering if there's maybe a case that's not, part of the traditional canon, but maybe it really impacts the students in a strong way, or, demonstrates a point more than one that's taken as gospel. Will that start to become, utilized more as more and more professors share their custom casebooks? I don't know. Let's find out. So a quick link to H2O, h2o.law.harvard.edu. There's the contact email there, h2o@cyber.law.harvard.edu. I'll also throw you my email address at the end for contacting me directly about that. So, rapid fire, H2O, sort of what it is, how it works. I'm going to turn it over to Tom now. He's going to talk about a little more in depth as far as what we go through and considerations we have to have when curating the content in H2O.
All right, so that's kind of the quick version, as he said, of what H2O does. So I'm going to figure out where to put this. Now, there are other considerations to talk about in terms of actually managing this content. Whether or not you're going to be a professor who is working as an author of a playlist, or whether or not you are someone who is going to be sort of tasked with collecting this material or maintaining the material, or in some way supporting an author who's building a playlist. So there's two different things I want to talk about. The first one are listed as logistical, which has to do with actually getting the content in there. And then we're going to talk about some legal issues about the content itself, because H2O is an open website. Everything that's on there, unless it's something you've marked as private, which means only you as the author can see, everything on there is on the open web. So there are legal issues attached to that. So Brett mentioned these different types of content that you can add to H2O. And cases, text, links, PDFs, images, audio, video. So let's start first with sort of the top dog there, cases. And when we talk about cases, mainly what we're talking about here are U.S. court cases, state, federal. The kinds of things you would find on Google Scholar or Westlaw or Fastcase or Lexis or any of these databases, or in reporters that we have on our shelves for reported cases. And when we're talking about these U.S. court cases, the H2O team is who, for the most part, is adding these to the system. That's one of the big things that I do, is if there's a case that's not already in H2O the professor needs for their playlist, then it's up to me to get that into H2O for them. And when I say that I or someone else on the team is tasked with doing that, these have to be reasonable requests. I mean, if you send us a request for 3,000 cases, that might be a problem. We will try to figure out what the best strategy is to get that in there. If that's what you absolutely need for your class, and we can figure out some way to make that happen in time for your class, then we will try to figure out how to make that happen. But if your class starts next week, that's probably not going to happen. So when Brett, I was talking to Brett a couple days ago, and he was talking about how before he started his job here, he had never heard the term bandwidth used to represent human labor. And since he got here, he hears that word all the time. Because this is exactly the kind of thing that word gets applied to, that we only have a certain amount of human bandwidth to make this happen. But that said, a month leading up to a semester, I will often add hundreds of cases to H2O, so it's not like this is something where we've been overburdened with that sort of thing in the past. But I just wanted to get it out there that there is going to be a limit there. So how does that happen? Well, basically, you send us a list of whatever cases you need. Some of those, hopefully, may already be in H2O, and we can just send you a link to the case that's already in there. But most of the people who are writing these playlists are savvy enough that if the cases are already in there, they're finding them already, and so what we're getting as requests are cases that are not yet in the system. And so you send us that list, and then once I or someone else goes through, adds that case to the system, then we'll send you an email with a link to the case that you asked for, or as is usually the case, it'll be a list of cases that you've asked for. I'll send you back a list, case name, link, case name, link. And then from there, you're able to take that and do what's called collaging, where you edit the case down to what you want to use for your playlist. So why are cases the thing that we sort of curate ourselves? Well, it's because that really is sort of the biggest piece of content that goes into H2O, and was sort of the impetus for this project in the first place, to replace the casebook. And so that type of content is something that we want to provide some sort of quality assurance over, to make sure that the content, when you ask for a case and you want to use a case, that you're actually getting the case you need in the best possible format. And to make sure that the actual styling of the case is going to be consistent from case to case to case, that the headings look the same, the title of the case looks the same, that block quotes within the case look the same, footnotes look the same, that everything will work the same from case to case to case. So that's why we take on that responsibility. Also, there's going to be metadata associated with all these cases. The case name, obviously, the citation to a reporter, docket number, the date, the court that heard the case. Those are things that we also want to make sure that all of that information is correct, so that when someone is looking for that material, they can find it. And when a student is using your playlist in a class, you're not presenting something that has bad metadata attached to it that they will see and might reflect poorly on you as the author or the professor. So moving on from cases, the next type of content type that you can add to H2O is text. And when I say text, I mean text. It's any text that's not a case. There is some gray area in terms of whether or not a foreign case or an international case would get classified using the content type case or text. It has in the past been used under the case content type, but we're kind of moving away from that, at least for now, until we figure out a permanent way to deal with that situation. Most importantly to take into consideration here is that you, meaning the author of the playlist, are going to be responsible for ingesting that non-case content. So whether it's something that the professor has written themselves, a sort of introductory text to a unit, whether it's a law review article that they want ingested in that way, that's going to be something that the professor themselves are responsible for making happen, which means the author, the professor, can either do it themselves, or, as might more frequently be the case, they would be delegating that to somebody else at their institution, whether that's a faculty assistant, whether they have RAs that they're working with, or some places, librarians. I mean, that's, while we provide cases for everyone, I am also working frequently with professors here at Harvard to get other non-case content added in to their playlists, because that's something that, supporting our own professors, I'm providing separately from ingesting cases. So ingesting that text, basically, it's a very simple interface, and it's basically just like you were writing a blog post. You've got a title field, and you've got a WYSIWYG editor. And so it's a very simple interface, But more often than not, the way that the content is going to be added in there is going to be copying and pasting, which makes things a little more complicated. The reason being is that most of this content is not something that you're going to be authoring originally, typing directly into the H2O editor. And most of that content is probably going to be lengthy. If you're talking about, a foreign case, I ingested a South African case for a professor. It took me a week to ingest one case because it was 150 pages and there was a lot of formatting. And I didn't have a good original HTML source to work from that didn't need to be edited. So that was a time-consuming process, even copying and pasting it. But that copying and pasting will vary according to the source that you're using. A different source, if I had a better source for that case, that might have taken me 10 minutes to ingest with copying and pasting. So whatever you're copying and pasting from is going to dictate how sort of onerous that process can be. You're starting with HTML. That's probably the best possible thing because it's already HTML text. You can usually go to a web page, copy what you want, come back to that text editor in H2O, paste it, and you will get something closely resembling what was on the original page. With the caveat being that if you know anything about HTML, you know that a lot of the formatting on the original page was probably dictated by a style sheet for that website, and the style sheet for H2O is going to be different. So things might look a little bit different, so then you would need to go in and manually clean that up. Copying and pasting from Word to HTML can often be a nightmare because Word adds a lot of extra HTML code. It's really ugly if you go under the hood and look at all of the different tags that Microsoft Word adds when you save something as HTML, or even when you copy and paste something from Word into an editor like this. And so even more so than, say, when you're copying from a web page into H2O, you can encounter some unwanted formatting that you need to clean up. And for Word especially, but also with HTML, there are going to be times when you need to do a lot of cleanup, and there are some sort of shortcuts that you can use to get there. If you know regular expressions and can use regular expressions and have a text editor that works with regular expressions, then it can be fairly quick once you identify what strings you're looking for to find all of these extraneous things you want out and get rid of them or replace them with something cleaner. But you have to know how to use regular expressions to be able to do that. That's not exactly a skill set that everyone has. There's also some online tools that sort of automate this process for you. I was involved in a process of ingesting a huge book, hundreds of documents, into H2O, and the code that we were moving from needed to have a lot of extra tags stripped out of it. And so for this huge project, my best friend was cool HTML tag and attribute online stripper. It's kind of humorous that this became such an integral part, and tomorrow this thing could be gone, and I would have to find somewhere else to do that. But you can see, you paste in your text, tell it what tags you want allowed, what attributes you want allowed, hit go, it gives you clean code that strips out any tags not on that list and any attributes not on that list. And then you take that and you paste it into H2O and you've got clean code. So there are ways to make this easier. PDFs are kind of the big bad bear here, in the sense that when you copy from a PDF into H2O, even when you're talking about a digitally born PDF where everything is text recognizable and you can highlight and copy things easily, a lot of times the structure and the formatting of that document doesn't get transferred over when you paste it into something else. Sometimes every single soft line break in paragraphs will get turned into a hard line break. You've got to go and get rid of all of those extra paragraph breaks. Other times, headers and footers within the page will then get copied in or get pasted in line with the rest of the document. So that's a consideration. If you can avoid using a PDF, it's probably a good idea to find some other source for the content. If it's a digitally born PDF, maybe there's a Word document version that you have access to that will be easier to use. And if you're talking about a scanned document, a PDF, then you're talking about having to deal with all of the OCR errors that come in with scanned documents. And even the best OCR software still invites a lot of noise into these documents. And when a professor, say, hands you a stack of articles that have been copies of copies of copies that have been passed down, that used to be what he would give out to the class or would be part of the copy center packet that they would be buying, which is fine if you're reading it and you're using your own eyes, because your eyes will do a lot of correcting when things are smudgy or blurry, or even when they're perfect, and the OCR will still mistranslate it. So that's going to require a lot of cleanup, to the point where if sometimes it might actually be more time efficient to retype something than it would be to actually copy and paste from an OCR PDF. Something else to keep in mind in this whole copy and paste thing and with the text content in general is that H2O does not actually host non-text content, the multimedia sorts of things. Images have to live somewhere else. So if you have a law review document that has a law review article, or even a case, there are cases that have photos or have charts or graphs in them. You can't just copy and paste those into H2O and have those images showing up. Those images, those charts, those graphs, whatever, they need to actually live somewhere else on the web. And if you're going to integrate those in, you would need to have that pulled in, embedded in some other way. And you see, there are other options here for multimedia. We'll talk about it in a second, but this PDF, images, audio, video content types are not going to solve that problem. That content has to live somewhere else. So if a law review article that you want to pull in is all text, you're probably fine. If there's lots of charts and graphs, you're probably going to need to figure out a way to make that work. And a lot of times it might be using another content type to embed the chart and graph and have a link to it within the text in H2O so that you can get to it easily. But it's going to be difficult to get it sort of to display in line with the way the site is currently operating. Also, when you're talking about cases and text, these first two content types, the big benefit of both of these is that they can be collaged. They can be edited. They can be customized for the professor, for the class, for the students in that class. And that's a huge benefit, to the point where all of the difficulties that come with getting in some of the more complicated content can often be worth it just for the benefit of being able to do that collaging. All right, so now talking about some other types of content. Links, it's very simple. It's a link to external content. So anything on the World Wide Web, anything on the course management system or e-reserves, even to library databases, any of those things. If something has a URL, it can be added to a playlist in H2O as a link. This is going to be a lot easier than ingesting text. So if you have a very long case that is going to be difficult, or a long article or something, some sort of government document that is in a PDF form, has lots of images, that's going to be difficult to ingest as text, well, just having a link to it where it lives on the web is going to be much easier than ingesting it, but then there won't be the benefits of collaging. You will be sending the student somewhere else to actually view the content off-site. And then these last four content types, PDFs, images, audio, video, all of this multimedia content, this content type is embedded content. This is not actual PDFs that you upload to H2O, or images or audio or video that you upload directly to H2O. These are things that, again, have to live somewhere else. So that, here's an example of something from the Federal Register that's a PDF that has been added to H2O, and you see there's an embedded PDF reader right there in the page, so that if they click on that in the playlist, it will take them directly to view this PDF right in H2O. But that PDF actually lives on copyright.gov. That's an external PDF that is embedded on the H2O site. Same with charts and graphs. If you add those in as images, this one lives on the Berkman website. but is embedded directly in H2O. The benefit of embedding this content directly within H2O, even if it lives somewhere else, is that then the users, the students who are viewing this content, aren't sent somewhere else to view it. They will still be able to view it directly within the H2O site where your playlist is. And these can all be added to a playlist. But they can't be collaged because they don't live on H2O, and they aren't text content anyway that you would be able to edit that way. But all of these content types, as Brett mentioned, can be added to the same playlist one after the other. So here in this playlist, there's a collaged case, collaged text, a link, a PDF image, all one by one, all within the same playlist. So all kinds of different content within the same exact playlist. So having talked about the logistics of getting content in, now let's talk a little bit about the legal concerns. First off, copyright issues. And I'm not a copyright attorney, and I'm not going to be able to tell you exactly what's legal and what's not, but even if I was, I still wouldn't be able to answer that question because copyright law isn't that simple anyway. And it's actually gotten worse since even though the Georgia State case was a good outcome for the most part, it actually complicated the legal issues a little bit. So basically, the copyright issues here with the content, it is the author's responsibility. Whoever is ingesting this content in, whoever is adding it to a playlist, it's your responsibility to make sure you actually have the right to add this content to H2O. First off, this is a website that anyone can view. So if you're adding content to H2O, you're adding it to the open World Wide Web, and if you don't have the right to add that, that's a problem. And then in addition to that, when you add things to H2O, you are adding it to assign a Creative Commons license to it. And if you don't have the right to do that on content, then that's a problem as well. If something is public domain, then that's an easy one. You can add it to H2O because you can add it anywhere. You have the right to do that, use that however you want. And so US case law is in the public domain, which is why if it's a US case for the most part, we can add that into the system and then allow people to collage that and remix it and do whatever they want with it. Foreign cases get a little more tricky because different jurisdictions have different rules. Some countries require you to get permission before you reprint their case law or their statutes or any sort of legal government authored works. Other countries are like the US, free and clear. Everything's public domain. Or you could have something that's kind of complicated like India where it's under copyright, but it's not a copy violation to reproduce it. So you effectively public domain even though there is a copyright. So when you're talking about books and journals, almost always those are going to be under copyright. So in my examples before, I was kind of talking about, say you wanted to add a law review as text. If you didn't actually own the copyright on that law review article, then you wouldn't really be able to add that as text within H2O. I think one of the initial assumptions that some people have when they think about replacing their casebook with H2O is that, hey, I will just scan my entire casebook and put it on H2O. And then my students will all have access to that content without having to buy a $200, $300, $400 casebook. And well, that book's under copyright. And I think we all know that. Even the people who want to do that, they realize that, but they just know that that would be a lot easier. But that's probably not a good idea. So if something is not public domain, the question is what you're doing, is that fair use? And this is where it gets really complicated because there's the four-factor test. If you know anything about fair use and copyright law, there's the four-factor test. I could tell you what the four factors are, but it wouldn't clear up any issues whatsoever in the real world. And so the next thing that made it so easy for libraries for so long were the 1976 classroom guidelines that everyone relied on in setting up their e-reserve policies, which talked about you could use one chapter from a book or up to 1,000 words at one time. Well, that might work for an e-reserve system. That might work for an e-reserve system where the only people who have access to that content are the people in the class. But when you're talking about a website like H2O, Well, if you can only add one chapter, that means that really there can only be one chapter on all of H2O. And so if anybody else has ever added another chapter from that book, well, now you're surpassing what the 1976 classroom guidelines said was okay. So a workaround to that problem is the fact that you can still actually use e-reserves or your course management system to restrict access to the actual content to the people who are in the actual class. So you would just, rather than posting the content directly on H2O or even posting it somewhere else and then having a link to it on H2O, you would post it on your CMS or your e-reserve system and use a link to that. So that restricts the access, and then so if this link to this article by April Cherry is a link to the e-reserve system here at Harvard or to our CMS called iSites, then when a student clicks on that or anybody in the world clicks on that link, they get taken to a login to log in with their Harvard ID. If they have a Harvard ID and that Harvard ID has access to that content, they then get the PDF. If they don't have a Harvard ID, or if their Harvard ID doesn't get them access to that, they don't get to this PDF. So now we've got this behind a password wall so that we're not just serving it up for the entire world. Now, of course, keep in mind that if you are going to think, well, then I'll just put the entire casebook on the e-reserves and link to it from H2O, everybody can see your playlist on H2O, which means that if you are linking to an entire casebook on H2O, the entire world will see that you've linked to an entire casebook on your e-reserve system. So even though they can't get to the content, they can still see your copyright violations. And just to make it even more complicated, those 1976 guidelines that made it so easy with one chapter and 1,000 words, the Georgia State case actually kind of called into question whether or not those guidelines were actually valid. So that takes us back to the four-factor test, which I could list the 4 factors, but it won't clear anything up for you. So, as I said, there's no solutions here other than to make you aware that this stuff is on the open web, and you need to be aware of that when you're adding content. And then the last thing, legally speaking, separate from copyright, there are licensing considerations to take into account in terms of the databases where you get this content. So a lot of people would think, okay, I want to add a law review article to my playlist. So I will download the article from Hein Online, post the Hein Online PDF on my CMS or on my e-reserves, and then link to the version behind the password on my playlist. Well, the problem with that is that you need to check your database license, because oftentimes, even though you have access to that content, you do not have the right to then take that content and post it somewhere else, even e-reserves. So Hein Online, terms and conditions will not allow you to take a PDF and then post it on e-reserve somewhere, even if it's fair use, because this is not a copyright issue, it's a licensing issue. Same goes for JSTOR. Their terms and conditions don't allow you to do that, even if it's fair use. And this is going to vary from database to database, but you should probably err on the side of assuming that the terms and conditions will not allow you to repost the content. So how do you work around that? Well, instead of putting the content on the CMS, you can just link to the database. And as long as there's a URL directly to the document, which JSTOR and Hein Online both provide, you can provide a link in your playlist that goes directly to the database. So again, looking at this article from April Cherry, rather than posting it on iSites, we can post a link here that goes directly to a database. They still get the password because it's a library database, so they have to be a student to get access to that. But rather than going to the PDF on iSites, they get the article on Hein Online. Same content, they still got there, still part of your playlist, but now you're not violating either copyright or the licensing violations. All right, turn it back to Brett to talk about the future.
All right, thanks, Tom. That's awesome. All right, so H2O, moving forward, where are we now? What's coming? What are we working on? So we're sort of right now we're sort of in a summer development phase. The semester finished, and now we're implementing a lot of changes, feature adds, that sort of stuff. It's interesting because it's at an active daily development thing, and it's actually it's a unique experience. I haven't ever really had the opportunity to participate like this, in that myself and my office mate Adam Ziegler, who is the sort of development-facing manager for H2O development side, essentially we're working with the developers day in and day out. So we're in contact with them, and bugs are getting worked out, or sort of 1 week after we make a feature suggestion, it's there, it's up on the site. And I've never really had the chance to see that active, have that happen in such an active way, and that's kind of cool. What we do is we gave all known current faculty users a heads up about the upcoming changes, confirmed that their use was finished for the semester. There weren't any sort of makeup exams that they still had to use the system for, and that was our sort of front-facing, off the bat. We're going to make some tweaks and code upgrade, which means some bugs were going to kind of start popping up. So we wanted to let them know that was coming down the road. We're also planning an end of summer notification, probably some sort of pop-up or a click-through that breaks down the new changes and new features in H2O. And also in this phase, there's been some unexpected things, like a professor at Villanova, unbeknownst to us, was using H2O to build out a playlist for one of his courses. And we had already started development and the code upgrade, so he emailed me and he was like, there's some weird things going on. I don't know what's happening. So he's been actually really, Michael Risch, I think is his name, he's been really game as, hey, I ran into this bug, or this is can you help me out with this sort of thing? So that's been something that came unexpectedly. So changes we've already implemented this summer. Annotator, aka layering, also known as the way sort of you edit a case, that has been overhauled. So before, the old annotator tool was you click the first word of this chunk you wanted to hide, you click the last word, and then you go hide it. Now it's much more straightforward of a click and drag to select that. That's more, click and drag. Performance improvements, we've removed a couple elements to make it load faster. The code itself, they've sort of cleaned up as well to make sure page is loading faster, just basically content comes up quicker. Implemented two-step verification for new users. That's helped us with the amount of any spam posting that was going on there. We're getting Viagra, this and that, or that's not. We didn't need that in H2O. And also, as I mentioned, the Ruby on Rails code upgrade. So that was a big upgrade. We had to wait till the semester was over before implementing that. What's still coming? We've got, basically this is a short list. We're improving the search and adding filters to that, because right now it's a pretty catch-all form of search. So we're going to be adding a lot of nuance. You can filter by, obviously, your own content, or specific users, or even different types of content. So sort of an advanced search, advanced filtering for that. User dashboard overhaul, making that much more useful. So when you first log in, instead of just bringing you to a splash page, if you've already logged in previously, it would take you right to your dashboard. Your content's there. It's much easier to work from. Analytics, so we can get a better grasp on basically who's using it, how often, what pages are being accessed, and then we can take that information and sort of see what sections people are using the most, and really focus on development in those areas. And also the case ingestion process. Right now, for when we are pulling in, when we're pulling in cases, there is that step, as you mentioned, we'll either run it through the HTML stripper, or we use a thing we developed to parse HTML tags, and that, it's kind of bootstrapped, that part of it. So we're working to really have case ingestion become a feature directly in H2O, and ideally get this to the point where there can be sort of a main point of contact at different institutions who can maybe handle the case ingestion for their own institution, instead of it always having necessarily work through us, get to a point where some of that can be done at each institution. Working on improving the get started, the getting started on ramping new users, so not just thrown into the water, but sort of really have a break down a path that they can either build a new playlist or just sort of view content or even a sort of tutorial for how they can use it, and more. So there's a lot on the plate, and we're really we're kind of powering through this summer to get through all that. Again, here's the link, contact email. There's my email address on there as well, and yeah, that's pretty much it. And I want to open it up now for questions to you guys, for myself or Tom, if there's any of those. Yes?
How do you see this interfacing or improving in two directions, E-Langdell?
I personally haven't delved into E-Langdell. I'm aware of it, but I haven't really used it all that much. Tom, have you?
Callie didn't come a calling.
If they have, it wasn't to us. There would be other people within law school that would be.
We have had some conversations with John and his team, and got together and talked about these are sort of two solutions, and is there a way we can possibly work together? And I think we need to talk more about it. At the time, I think we were not quite mature enough yet in H2O to really get everything. And I'm not sure from his. I can't speak for him, but it's a possibility.
Thank you, Kim.
So this is a Harvard project.
Yes.
And so it resides here and is a sense of it, but it is being opened to other participants? That's basically it?
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
Open to all. I mean, it's open publicly.
So it's, as you say, the actual content is all Creative Commons, but the infrastructure that supports it is all Harvard, and essentially it's relying on Harvard to keep it open.
Yes.
Shut it 10 years from now, it would go away.
Right.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. It currently it resides here. I think the servers are at the Berkman Center, but it's shared management with the law school, Harvard Law Library, and the Berkman Center. It's the sort of thing where at this point now in its life, it's there's been some talk as far as where is it going next, where will it'll live next, as far as a few preliminary discussions with Harvard Central, Harvard University IT, as far as just we want this to evolve into a content tool for across the university. And not just, primarily right now, it's primarily the law school that utilizes it. And we've got a couple of professors who are from the undergrad who are actually trying to build out their courses now on H2O to test it out for this upcoming semester. So,
second question, if I may. The importation features you have are basically cases and all other text. You don't have anything that would be specifically aimed at, say, statutory or regulatory material. So I would get that in some text format and then chunk it in as text. You don't have a dedicated way of presenting any of that.
That's correct. The way that it works now, and it varies from professor to professor what they find to be the easiest way. There are plenty who are just linking to PDFs or linking to some online source. I know when I was looking for content to add to my slides, I was noticing one class that almost everything in the playlist were links to Legal Information Institute U.S. Code. So that they were relying on that as their correct. But then there are other people who will add it in as formatted text that they can then collage the same way that they edit the cases.
Can you explain that collaging a little bit more?
Sure. So when a case is pulled in, it lives in H2O as a case. And then essentially when you convert a case to a collage is essentially a copy that you can edit. So to have a collage is a copy that you can edit. And that's where you can do the highlighting, you can do the editing. Let's see here. So here is so for example, here's a Roe v. Wade. This is the case, but you can see it's collage information. So I've already collaged this. In this case, like I said, the annotator, or sort of how you select a chunk of text, is different. So different than it used to be. So here we're viewing this case. What I'm going to do is I'm going to select a chunk. So I'm going to kind of layer out just one paragraph, and then I'm going to hide that. So again, the new annotator, I can click and drag, select that. I get this little pop-up guy here. I'll click that. Now if I want, I can type in an annotation here. That would appear, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to select this layer that I already created called Not Required. Hit Save. And now that little piece has been layered with that. So now I'm going to go up to Show Hide and Hide Not Required. So I'm hiding that layer. Now if I go back down to that, what's that paragraph? Does anybody remember that paragraph number? I hit it. I did. I hit it for myself. Let's see what's going on. I'll show that. So collage is just a copy of a case or copy of a text block that you can edit. Essentially what that is. All right. This one, okay, yeah, so paragraph 23 there. That little line demarcates that that's been layered. I'll hide, not required. All right, well, it's not hiding. Yeah. It's on that? All right. I know. Summer development. We're emailing the developers this morning. So I'm not in the development environment. I'm in the base one, but also because I'm presenting it, it's not supposed to work. So
the way that it actually works, though, is that all of those that have the lines beside the paragraph that have been added to that not required layer, once he hides that, all of those would get changed to the bracketed ellipses.
Yes.
So that content would be hidden, but the students could click on it to expand it and show hopefully.
That's right here.
I think part of what collage is thinking about collage is the name.
Yes.
And I know we've talked about that.
Some of the, yeah.
I understand why it was called that.
I came in about 5 months ago here to the law school, and the H2O terminology, I had to be like, okay, remix is that what? Okay, and collage is... Collage, yeah. That's not the clearest term to use. So that's what that.
That collage functionality with layered annotations, this is all for faculty, right, to edit and remix the content for their users. Right? I'm right so far? Maybe?
Yeah, I mean, if it's for any user, but we've been talking about it just from the faculty perspective.
So if you're a student and you're following, a faculty playlist for your class or something, you would have your individual login and you could add your own layers and
Yes.
collages.
Yeah. So right now, let's say professor has a playlist. Students, first day of class, say, they can remix that playlist, so make their own copy, that they can then make, so that copies over everything that's hidden, annotations from the professor, highlights, basically exactly how they had made their playlist. The student gets a copy of that. But now the student can make changes to that, they can make their own notes, highlight what they want, so they can then make their own edits. What we are looking at implementing is, and a student raised this, that's great. Student can make edits, play with it as they want, fantastic. Student raised the point, what if the professor makes changes to the playlist during the course? So what we're looking at now is implementing either basically a way to get notified, so the student will receive an email that says, this playlist you remixed, part 4 has been edited. Do you want to update your playlist? Or maybe an option that will automatically implement those changes to any remixed playlist from it. So that's one of our summer to-dos.
If you're working in H2O and you've got, say, for instance, a case that maybe collaged or not, and you've got possibly a really compelling clip of audio or video from an oral argument, say, you're not able to actually integrate that sort of into the text and basically have them click straight out from that to a multimedia portion. It's got to be a different part of the playlist, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so it can't be like in line with the case itself.
Right, like you can't add text to a case. Or, you can add an annotation and you could put the link in your annotation. They could copy and paste. Right now you can link you can select a chunk of text and you can link to another collage. What we're looking at is if you can make that link to anywhere. So maybe a certain part of the case, if you could put a link there to the the compelling audio of the argument, there could be some utility there as well. So you can add the link in as an annotation, and you can link words directly to another collage. But right now we're seeing as far as linking to content elsewhere. Yeah.
That actually beats me. I mean, on the one hand, I say fabulous. But on the other hand, I say this is a really strong automation tool for a very traditional approach.
Mm.
I'm sitting here looking at this and saying, I went to a thing earlier where we all kinds of flipping and integrating back and forth, and this is a wonderful tool for creating how we used to teach law.
Mm.
In
a new.
Whatever.
And essentially, you mean still using case law?
Yeah, I mean
case law itself.
This is a very 21st century way to teach a Langdellian method.
Sure.
19th century methodology.
Mm-hmm.
And that's both praise and
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and from what I understand, again, I'm newer to the law school world, and it doesn't seem like the most let's go sort of climate. So I mean, if there's baby steps, if we can get them there, fantastic. But I think we have to. There's got a breadcrumb trail to get to that point. And I think if we can turn it digital and we can get it customized, then maybe that's partway down the road.
I think you're going to find you're 10 years behind next year.
Okay.
I just a little bit more technical and user detail. I'm curious about the extent to which you experience demand for fairly sophisticated word processing functionality, like support for footnotes if somebody's entering text, support for track changes, any of the kinds of things that people are accustomed to on their desktop when they're writing, or do you find that people who are putting together these kinds of resources are adapting to the more limited functionality that's with web-based operating?
I personally haven't found, as far as demand for some of those features or some of that ability, I haven't found that to be too much. I know that in the sort of the WYSIWYG editor, you can switch over to HTML itself, and you can basically write in HTML as well. So that would support, creating links for footnotes, and because I've seen that in text blocks, instructors having text blocks with a footnote that jumps to the bottom when they click that within the text block itself. So through the HTML side of that. I don't know if Tom, you want to speak to that.
The issue with, there are plenty of footnotes, especially with the case content. When that comes in, it's got tons of footnotes in it. And the sort of gap there between the way that it's implemented and the way that people think about footnotes is that in the HTML world, footnotes are just anchors and links within the page. And so that's the way HTML tools tend to treat footnotes, as opposed to a more intuitive sort of way of working, which would be add footnote, and then it automatically inserts it to the bottom. And working with a WYSIWYG editor that's designed the way that one that works with Ruby on Rails and that sort of thing, it's a much more conventional sort of WYSIWYG editor that doesn't have that necessarily intuitive, more scholarly approach to the content. I mean, it's the same thing you get into when you start offering ebooks, is that ebooks don't know what footnotes are, they know what hyperlinks are. And so I'm not sure what the long-term solution for these two things to come together to make it more intuitive, but the functionality is there, it's just not named necessarily the way that someone who doesn't work with HTML would understand.
Cool. A couple more questions?
Can I just, this is a more practical one. In your experience, have you encountered a situation where the professor adopted this ebook method, and then by the time for the final examinations, like if we use ExamSoft, once they started, secured everything, the only thing they can use ExamSoft, but how do they get access to this ebook? Have you encountered this situation in your study?